The air inside the ancient chamber was thick with dust and the heavy scent of time, itself the lingering perfume of a civilization long swallowed by history. Flickering torchlight danced unevenly across the cracked walls, casting shadows that seemed to shift and whisper as Eryndor and Melis stepped cautiously into the heart of the ruins. Every footfall stirred centuries-old debris, a reminder of the fragility that surrounded them. Before them stretched a vast mural, though much of it had crumbled away, leaving only fragments of the story etched in stone. The images that remained were haunting. Figures, their faces twisted in agony and ecstasy, were intertwined with notes and musical symbols that glowed faintly with an otherworldly shimmer. They depicted a people who had once mastered the forgotten tune, wielding it with such fervor that the very air around them thrummed with magic. Yet, their mastery had not been without price. The mural's final scenes showed chaos cities aflame, shattered spires, and shadows crawling over the land like a sickness. Eryndor swallowed a lump in his throat as Melis's voice broke the silence, her tone low and reverent. They reached too far, too fast. The melody that gave them power also sowed their ruin. The lost language they wove into their songs was not meant for control, but for harmony. His fingers traced the faded lines of the mural, feeling the rough stone beneath his touch. But how? How did something so beautiful become so deadly? Melis's silver eyes met his, shimmering like starlight caught in the darkness. Ambition, unchecked and blind. They sought to command fate itself, bending others to their will through the song. But the melody is a delicate thread pulled too hard, and it unravels the very fabric that holds magic and life together. A sudden chill swept through the chamber, and Eryndor shivered despite the heavy cloak wrapped around him. The weight of the revelation settled heavily on his shoulders. This was no longer a mere curiosity, no longer a distant legend. It was a dire warning carved in stone, a fate he might share if he continued down the path he walked. Outside, Leora stood sentinel beneath the night sky, her keen green eyes scanning the horizon. The silence around her was unnatural, broken only by the faintest echo of a harmonic chant carried on the Windan ancient song that seemed both comforting and ominous. Her grip tightened on the hilt of her blade, muscles coiled in readiness. The dangers surrounding the forgotten tune were not just relics of the past, they were alive and waiting. Back inside, Eryndor bent over an inscription carved alongside the mural's images. The lost language whispered its secrets in cryptic symbols, patterns that Melis had taught him to recognize. Each character was a note, a rhythm, a pulse of magic woven into the very essence of the tune. As he deciphered the warning's phrases of sacrifice, balance, and ruin, the gravity of his burden deepened. This language, Eryndor murmured, it's more fragile than I imagined. One misstep, one wrong note, and everything could fall apart. Melis nodded solemnly. It is the melody's true curse and its greatest gift. To wield it is to dance on the edge of silence and destruction. The night deepened as they made camp beneath the stars, the ruins silent sentinels around them. The flickering campfire cast warm light onto their faces, illuminating the weariness and resolve that mingled in their eyes. Leora joined them, her presence a steady anchor amid the swirling uncertainties. Around the fire, their voices softened to whispers as they shared reflections on ambition and downfall. The lessons of the vanished civilization resonated deeply, a somber refrain that echoed their own struggles. Power demands a price, Leora said quietly, but it is not always the price we expect. Sometimes it is the cost of our own humanity. Eryndor looked into the dancing flames, the shadows playing across his pale features. I fear that if I keep playing the tune, I will lose more than strength. I might lose myself entirely. Melis placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Then you must choose what kind of song you wish to sing. One of domination and ruin, or one of balance and hope. The night stretched on, the stars above bearing silent witness to their vow. In the echoes of the vanished, a warning had been etched, and in their hearts, a promise was forged to honor the fragile magic of music, to resist the seductive call of power, and to find a path beyond the haunting desperation that threatened to consume them all. As Eryndor lay beneath the canopy of ancient stones, the melody hummed faintly in his mind, no longer a weapon, but a burden, a legacy, and a call to harmony. The dawn would bring new challenges, but for this moment, the echoes of downfall had taught him the most vital lesson, that in the balance of music and magic lay the fate of all. And so, with the first light creeping through the cracks of the ruined temple, Eryndor closed his eyes, resolved to carry the song forward not as a curse, but as a fragile hope. But even as hope kindled, the shadows of ambition whispered still, and the dance of melody and fate was far from over. The air in my chamber was thick with the scent of damp stone and fading candle wax. The soft crackle of the hearth a fragile barrier against the encroaching silence that threatened to consume me. I leaned heavily against the cold wall, my breath shallow, fingers numb and trembling as if the very essence of the forgotten tune pulsed. Through my veins each note, a razor cutting deeper into my flesh and soul. The melody haunted me still, a ghostly refrain echoing in the hollow chambers of my mind, teasing me with its intoxicating power even as it drained the last reserves of my strength. I closed my eyes, willing the exhaustion to pass, but the ache was relentless. It was not merely physical. The melody gnawed at the edges of my sanity, twisting memories and emotions into dissonant chords that refused to resolve. I could feel the fragile thread that tethered me to the world fraying with every breath, every whispered note that escaped my lips unbidden. I was perched on the precipice of silence, the abyss yawning beneath me, ready to swallow the barred hole. A soft knock at the door stirred me from the depths of my despair. Eryndor Leora's voice was low, tentative yet steady, carrying the warmth of a steadfast flame in the cold night. She entered quietly, her keen green eyes scanning my pale, drawn face with a mixture of concern and fierce determination. The torchlight flickered across her braided auburn hair, casting dancing shadows that seemed to chase away some of the darkness that clung to me. "You shouldn't push yourself so hard," she murmured, stepping forward to place a firm hand on my shoulder. The contact grounded me, tethering me back from the edge of oblivion. "The music is killing you, but you're more stubborn than any chord I've ever heard." I managed a weak smile, the corners of my mouth trembling. "It's not just the music, Leora, it's the silence that scares me. The thought that once the tune fades from me, it might take me with it." Her eyes softened, but the resolve in her voice remained unbroken. "Then we'll find another way. You're not alone in this." The days that followed blurred into a tapestry of fevered rehearsals and restless nights. Each attempt to coax the forbidden melody from my lute sent fresh waves of pain through my body, but also brought fleeting glimpses of the tune's vast potential. Its ancient harmonies whispered secrets of fate and free will, weaving invisible threads that pulled at the hearts of kings and commoners alike. Yet, with every performance, I felt the melody's curse tighten its grip, a noose of sound that strangled my vitality. In the midst of this torment, Melis appeared like a silver spectre, her presence both ethereal and grounding. She led me to a dimly lit chamber lined with scrolls and relics from a civilization long vanished beneath the sands of time. Her eyes, shimmering with starlight, held a knowledge that both comforted and unnerved me. "The lost language within the tune is fragile," she whispered, tracing a delicate finger along an ancient manuscript. It is a double-edged sword, power intertwined with sacrifice. But there is a fragment, a verse that may undo the curse. Hope flickered in my chest, fragile and tentative. What must I give in return? Her gaze was somber. More than you may be willing to surrender. The cost is great, and the path perilous. That night, I stood alone on the cliff's edge, the vast sea stretching endlessly before me. The wind carried faint echoes of the forgotten tune, as if the world itself breathed the melody. The stars above shimmered cold and distant, indifferent witnesses to my struggle. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down like the tide, pulling me towards silence or sound, destruction or salvation. Could I find the strength to rewrite my song before the music silenced me forever? Or would I become yet another lost note in the vast, haunting symphony of the vanished civilization? The edge of silence beckoned, and I was poised between despair and hope, melody and oblivion, fate and free will. The dance was far from over. The heavy oak door creaked softly as I pushed it open, stepping into the shadowed chamber where Yorvan awaited, his usual composure fractured by the flickering candlelight. The air was thick with unspoken words, tension coiling like a serpent between us. I could see the flicker of guilt in his sharp eyes, but it was overshadowed by something colder, calculating, unrepentant. "You betrayed us," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper, yet it rang with the weight of shattered trust. Yorvan's lips pressed into a thin line, gaze darting away. "I did what was necessary," he replied, his words cutting sharper than any blade. "King Maldron's reach extends far beyond what you understand. Aligning with him is survival." The room spun with the echo of his confession. A spy in our midst, feeding secrets to the man whose shadow loomed over every court and every whispered alliance. The betrayal wasn't just a personal wound, was a fracture in the fragile network we had built to protect the forgotten tune. Leora stood silently behind me, her green eyes flashing with quiet fury. She had always been the shield between me and the world's dangers, but even her formidable presence could not dispel the chill that settled in my bones. "How long?" she demanded, voice low and dangerous. "Long enough," Jorvin answered, his eyes meeting hers for a brief, defiant moment before he turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving a trail of doubt and fear. The days that followed were a whirlwind of suspicion and paranoia. Every glance felt like a threat, every whispered conversation a potential plot against me. Loyalties wavered like fragile leaves in a storm. I found myself questioning even those closest to me, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily upon my chest. Amidst this turmoil, a ray of cautious hope arrived in the form of Queen Isilda. Her council chambers, bathed in the warm glow of afternoon light, offered a stark contrast to the shadows that clouded my mind. She spoke with measured grace, her voice steady and calm, yet laced with the urgency of the times. "Eryndor," she began, "the path you walk is perilous, but your cause is just. My support is not given lightly, but you have it. The summit approaches, and the kingdoms hold their breath. Together, we may yet steer the tide." Her words were balm to a soul battered by betrayal, a fragile anchor in the storm. Yet, the caution in her eyes reminded me that alliances were delicate, easily broken by ambition or fear. Leora's presence remained my constant solace. I found her pacing by the window one evening, the fading light casting long shadows across her determined face. "We cannot trust blindly," she said, her voice resolute. "But we must act. The summit will be the crucible where our fate is forged." Her fierce loyalty was a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, bonds forged in fire could hold strong. Then there was Malise, whose ethereal presence seemed to shimmer on the edge of reality. She appeared in the twilight, her silver hair catching the dying light like threads of starlight. Speaking in riddles, she warned of the tune's fragile threads weaving through fate, a delicate balance that could unravel at the slightest misstep. The melody is a double-edged sword, she intoned softly. Its power sings of dominion and doom. Beware those who hear its call without heeding the cost. Her words lingered, a haunting refrain in my mind as I prepared for the summit that would decide more than just my own fate. The betrayal of Yorvin had shattered the sanctuary I had tried to build around myself, exposing the precariousness of trust in a world where power was a melody sung in shadows and whispers. Yet, amidst the fractures, the cautious alliance with Queen Isildur and the unwavering loyalty of Leora offered threads of hope. As the summit drew near, I steeled myself against the storm. The forgotten tune pulsed within me, a dangerous heartbeat marking the rhythm of a game where allies and enemies danced a treacherous waltz. The question remained, could I protect the fragile magic I wielded when the line between friend and foe blurred like notes fading into silence? The stage was set, and the world would soon listen to the song that could bind or break us all. But as the shadows lengthened and the whispered conspiracies thickened, I knew one thing for certain: the melody's true power was yet to be revealed, and the cost of its secrets might be higher than any of us dared imagine. And so I waited, the haunting desperation of the forgotten tune echoing in my veins, as the world held its breath for the music that would decide our fate. The chamber was a cathedral of ambition and whispered fears. Vast tapestries hung like silent witnesses from the towering walls, their woven threads shimmering faintly in the light of countless chandeliers. Each banner bore the sigil of a kingdom: lions, eagles, serpents, and ancient runes draped solemnly, yet vibrant with the promises and grudges of their bearers. The air hung thick with the scent of polished wood, beeswax, and the faintest trace of jasmine perfumed by the queens and courtiers who had gathered. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like the first notes of an expectant symphony, voices hushed yet charged with wary curiosity. I stood just beyond the heavy velvet curtain, my fingers brushing nervously over the strings of my lute. The wood was cool beneath my touch, familiar yet foreign in this moment of looming reckoning. Breathing in the scent of resin and old leather, I let my eyes close briefly, tasting the weight of the moment on my tongue. This was no mere performance. It was a gamble with fate itself. The summit was a crucible, a gathering where power, fear, and ambition collided. Every ruler present sought advantage, some with eager hunger, others with cautious calculation. Their eyes, sharp and unyielding, would watch me as I summoned the forgotten tuna melody that had whispered through the ages but never been wielded so openly before. With each note, I risked unraveling the fragile threads that bound the realms together, and with each breath, the melody threatened to consume what little strength I had left. Behind me, a soft rustle betrayed Leora's presence. Her steadying hand brushed briefly against my shoulder, grounding me. "Remember," she murmured, "you are more than the tune." I nodded, swallowing the lump of fear that threatened to choke me. Beyond the curtain, the hall was packed: kings and queens, lords and ladies, spies and soldiers, all present in this grand theater of power. The buzz of whispered conversations faded as the herald stepped forward, his voice ringing clearly through the chamber. "Lords and ladies, kings and queens, we gather in the shadow of uncertain times. Today, the bard Eryndor will perform a melody long lost to our age, a tune said to hold the power over kings themselves. Let all bear witness to the song that may shape our futures." A hush fell like a blanket. I stepped into the center of the hall, the polished floor cool beneath my feet, the eyes of the realm fixed upon me, some burning with hope, others glinting with suspicion or malice. My heart pounded a relentless drumbeat in my chest as I lifted my lute, fingers poised to unleash the first notes. King Maldron sat at the head of the gathering, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dark robe embroidered with iron motifs. His twisted crown caught the light, casting jagged shadows across his scarred face. His gaze pierced through me, a challenge and a threat wrapped into one. His ambition was as palpable as the air in the room, a suffocating presence that pressed against my skin. Taking a deep breath, I began. The first notes slipped from my fingers, delicate threads weaving through the silence. The forgotten tune rose, a haunting melody of ancient harmonies, each note a step deeper into the lost language of power. The air seemed to shift, vibrating with unseen currents, stirring the hearts of all who listened. Gasps and murmurs echoed as the melody wrapped round the assembled lords and ladies, binding them in fragile threads of influence. I could feel the strain in my arms, the sharp bite of exhaustion crawling beneath my skin. But the tune demanded sacrifice, and I was caught in its relentless dance. Queen Isildur's eyes shimmered with cautious hope, her fingers clutching a delicate handkerchief. Leora stood close by, her expression taut with concern yet fierce in her determination to shield me. Malice's silver gaze seemed to pierce the veil between past and present, her whispered riddles echoing in my mind. The melody grew stronger, a tide rising and crashing within the hall. Tension thickened, and I caught a flicker of movement near the shadows, the ever-watchful Talon. His rivalry a constant undercurrent, threatening to unravel me. As the final notes lingered, a silence heavier than any applause fell. The kings exchanged glances, their ambitions weighed and measured in a heartbeat. I lowered my lute, breath ragged but spirit unbroken. The summit's overture was complete, but the symphony was far from over. In this chamber of power and peril, the forgotten tune had found its voice once more, and with it, a future poised on the edge of a blade. I stepped back into the shadows, the echoes of the melody still humming through my veins. The path ahead was uncertain, the cost yet unknown. But one truth was clear: the fate of kingdoms, the balance of magic, and the very song of the world now rested in my hands. And as the doors closed behind me, sealing the summit's secrets within, I whispered to the silent strings, "Let the dance begin." The great hall was a cavern of shadows and whispered anticipation, its vaulted ceiling lost in darkness, lit only by flickering torches that cast trembling pools of firelight over the assembled kings and lords. My fingers trembled slightly as I stepped forward, the weight of their gazes pressing against my skin like a tangible force. The forgotten tune, that ancient, deadly melody, lay just beneath my fingertips, ready to unfurl its power once more. I closed my eyes briefly, drawing a breath that tasted of iron and old regrets, then set my lute across my knees. The first note slipped from the strings like a sigh, fragile and hesitant, threading its way through the heavy air of the chamber. A shiver ran down my spine, the melody's lost language stirring ancient echoes deep within me. Around me, the murmurs ceased. The room stilled as the music wove itself into existence. The notes swirled like a mist, curling around stone columns and draping the faces of kings with a spectral veil. I felt the subtle shift beneath the surface, the bending of wills, the soft unraveling of defenses. The melody was a dance, a dangerous choreography between power and sacrifice, and I was both its dancer and its prisoner. King Maldron sat at the far end of the hall, his presence looming like a storm cloud. His twisted iron crown caught the torchlight, throwing sharp glints across the scar that marred his cheek. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, burned with a mixture of envy and fury as the tune wrapped its fingers around his mind. I could feel the silent war raging behind those cold eyes, the hunger for control, the fear that drove him to dark alliances, the desperation that had made him the tyrant he was now. The music reached into him, and I sensed his resolve falter, if only for a heartbeat. Beside me, Leora's steady presence was a bomb against the swirling chaos. Her keen green eyes never left me, a silent anchor keeping me tethered to reality as the melody unfolded. I caught the faint scent of her leather armor, the subtle clink of her weapons. Reminders that beneath the music's enchantment lurked danger that no song could fully banish. She was my shield, my unwavering guardian in a world where trust was scarce and betrayal often hid behind the sweetest harmonies. The notes climbed, threading through the hall like silver threads binding the fates of all present. I felt my breath shorten, a sharp pang blossoming in my chest as the toll of the tune pressed deeper into my spirit. Each performance was a battle, a perilous bargain between power and destruction, and this was the most crucial yet. The air thrummed with tension as the kings leaned forward, their wills bending subtly, caught in the web of ancient harmonies. I saw the flicker of doubt in Queen Issildar's eyes, the cautious hope mingling with fear. She was a rare ally, one who saw not just the power but the peril, and it steadied me to know she stood with me, if only tentatively. Meleys watched from the shadows, her silver hair and starlit eyes reflecting the haunting beauty of the moment. Her presence was a reminder of the vanished civilization whose fate was a dire warning etched into every note I played. The lost language of the tune was fragile and dangerous, a double-edged sword wielded through melody. I could almost hear her whispered riddles weaving through the music, urging caution even as ambition pushed me forward. As the crescendo neared, the hall seemed to hold its breath. The melody surged, a wave of power that rippled through the gathered lords and kings, binding them in a delicate dance of influence and dread. I was the conductor of their fates, the invisible thread pulling on the strings of kingdoms. But I was also the one caught in the tune's deadly embrace, each note draining life and hope in equal measure. The dance was intoxicating and ruinous, a song of dominion that promised glory at the expense of ruin. The final chord hung in the air, a shimmering echo that trembled with unspoken promises and threats. Silence fell like a shroud, broken only by the quiet gasps and shifting of the court. The kings looked to one another, uncertain, their wills subtly entwined, yet fragile as spun glass. I lowered my lute slowly, feeling the familiar ache spread through my limbs, the creeping exhaustion that whispered of the price yet to come. King Maldron's sharp eyes locked with mine across the hall. His rage simmered beneath a veneer of control, a silent vow that this was far from over. The forgotten tune had made me both powerful and vulnerable, a beacon and a target. The deadly dance between melody and fate had only just begun, and the steps ahead promised no mercy. I took a breath, steadying myself against the tide of emotion's fear or desperation that swirled like a haunting refrain in my chest. The music was a living thing, a language lost to time but etched into my soul. It bound me to a fate I could neither escape nor fully embrace. And yet, within its deadly beauty, I glimpsed the slender thread of Hopper, chance to rewrite the song, to find a harmony beyond destruction. As the court erupted into cautious whispers and guarded glances, I felt the weight of all that had come before and all that lay ahead. The dance with destiny was far from over. The melody played on, and so must I. But for now, the hall was mine, and the forgotten tune whispered its haunting promise into the night.